Guys, the very first question was this interviewer asked, what happens if I uncomment the first two lines? Guys, here we need to understand a very basic thing that this function is a function declaration which is initialized at compile time only. And that's why it's available everywhere in the file. Does not matter we call it at the top or here or here. And guys, this availability of function at the top of your code is known as hoisting. Whereas the second function is a function expression, which is not hoisted, which means it loads only when the interpreter reaches this line. In simple words, we cannot use function expression before they are defined. So this function is defined in line number 8, so we cannot use it before that. With that knowledge, we can answer this question. Let me uncomment the first two lines. Guys, you can see the function foo runs fine, but the second function call throws a error. And I hope now you know why. The next question was this. He said the problem is this function always prints only 10 and that too as soon as I call this function. But I want to return both the values and print only when it's needed. Because the problem in JavaScript is that a JavaScript function can have only one return statement. It cannot have more than that. And whatever code you write after the first return statement will never execute and it becomes unreachable. To solve this problem in ES6, generators were introduced. Generators are different kind of function that can pause the execution at one or multiple times and resume the execution whenever needed. And that's exactly what we want. To convert a normal function into a generator function, we need to add a star either here or before the function name. I prefer to use it here. And it's a generator function now. And we can replace this return statement with yield keyword now. Okay. And now you can see generator function does not run the code. Instead, it returns a generator object. And whenever it encounters this yield, it saves the state, pauses itself right there. And to resume the execution, we can call this next method, which is available in the generator object. And this will resume the execution from where it was paused. So now let's call the next method on this result. And before me, let me clear the console. Call it. You can see, guys, it is an object with two properties. One is value and one is a Boolean flag. Here you can see this is the yielded value. And if you want to print it, you can write dot value as well. With that, you can get 10 back. Now, to print the second value, we need to call the same thing again. And this time 20 is also printed. Let me clear the console and try to call it one more time without the value. Now you will see 10 is printed, 20 is printed, and now this next returns a object which has a value undefined because there is nothing after the generator has yielded 20. And the done flag is true now, which means this is done. So guys, with the help of generator function, we have solved this problem. The next question was this. Here is the object and this is the expected output. Basically what's happening is there is an array. Inside that there are two more arrays and these arrays are getting generated from these key value pairs of these objects only. So here we have name as the key, ram is the value, and in the first array you can see ram name ram, age is the key and 30 is the value, and here is the second array. So what I had done is I did it with the object.entries method. Object.entries method takes each key value pair and keep them in a individual array. And then all these individual arrays are kept into a single array. And that's exactly what we want to do here, correct? So for that, I simply console log object with a capital O dot entries and then happened dot entries and then here we can pass this person object And now if I save it, you can see we have a array, and inside that there are two more arrays. If I open the first one, it has name and RAM, and the second array has age and 30. So it's working fine. But to that, interviewer said, okay, it looks good, but try it to do without object.entries method. Basically, he wanted me to create a new method which does the same thing. Okay. So for that, let me comment it out first, and I'm going to create a new method. Let's call it get object entries. Okay, and of course it takes object, and let's call it the object is the person here. So I'm going to pass person. Now let's write the logic. So to create a array like this, first of all, I want to get all the keys from this object. So to get the keys, I can write const object keys is equal to object with the capital O dot keys, and pass the object we are getting from the method by calling it, right? So I'll pass object here. And now just let's log it out so that we can see what's exactly in there. Okay. So here we get an array with name and age, and name and age are the key of this object. Next, I want to iterate over these object keys. So I'm going to write object.keys.map, and inside that there is a key, and inside the callback I'm going to write const value equals to whatever this object, and pass the key to it dynamically. With the square brackets, we can pass the keys dynamically. Okay. What it will do is it will iterate over these object keys, basically these keys, name and age. Then first, in the first iteration, we get name here, and here you can see object and name will be passed here. Okay, then object name is Ram, correct? So the value would be Ram here. In the second iteration, when age is passed, then object age key will be passed here, and then it will get the value 30. Okay, so first it gets RAM and then it gets 30. And if there are more keys and values, then it will keep iterating over that. Okay, and then I can return a array. So in the output, you can see there is an array with key in the left side and the value on the right side. So here I'll return the array with the key in the left side and the value in the right side. As you know, map creates a new array. So basically this is the inner array. This array, these two arrays will be created by this return, and this map will create a new array which will wrap all these returned arrays, right? So this I can store. Okay, and here we can finally return the result. Okay, and now let's print it by console log this result. Let me clear the console and save it. This first console is coming from this object.keys, just ignore it. And the second console log has a array with two arrays inside it. And if I expand, you can see the first array has name and RAM, and the second array has age and 30, which is the expected output. Guys, with that, we have solved this problem. If you know any other way to do it, please comment below. Guys, the next question he asked me was a React question. He had shared me this data. This was HTML with some content and some styling. And actually it was a string. Okay? And he wanted me to display this in the UI with the stylings. Okay. So for that, let me store this into a variable called data. And before going to the solution, let me show you a very interesting use case of this kind of HTML string. Let's open Amazon.com. Here, open the network tab. First inspect it and then select the network tab from here. Select this fetch XHR and then refresh the page so that we can see the API calls. Okay. And here if I scroll on the home page, you can see there is this sponsored text with a information icon, right? And now if I go to the feedback API and check the response of it, so here is the headers, payloads, and the preview. Then you can see there is a HTML property, then script, and then status. Script has some JavaScript. I just want to show you the HTML. So in the HTML, you can say this is a string. And if I scroll more to the right, you will find that there is a sponsored text as well, which is displayed on the Amazon homepage. Okay. So let me scroll. It has some stylings also and all that. And if I keep scrolling, then okay, here you can see this, the tag is getting closed here, and then there is this sponsored text. Okay, and with some HTML, I mean, with some styles and all that. The point I want to highlight here is that company like Amazon is also using this HTML string approach. Okay, now let's go back to Code Sandbox. And here, let me pass the data and save it. Now you can see on the UI, it is displayed to the UI, but as is. The styles are not applied here. But the interviewer wanted me to apply the styles as well. The problem here is React is unaware that there is HTML inside this string. For React, it's just a normal string, and that's why it's rendering it as is. To make React aware of this, we can use a property called dangerously set inner HTML, okay, which is equivalent of the inner HTML attribute in the browser DOM. Okay, with the regular vanilla JavaScript, if you want to grab some, not grab, if you want to change the content of any HTML element, we use that inner HTML attribute, right? Similar to that, if you want to get the similar behavior in React, we can use a dangerously set inner HTML. Before using this, you need to keep two things in mind. One, the element here is a div element. We are passing the property should not have any children, which means we cannot pass this data like this. Also, we need to use the element as a self-closing tag. This is the first requirement. The second one is it requires a object, the HTML key, underscore HTML, and then there we can pass the data. And guys, now you can see the style have been applied. And there is one more thing you need to keep in mind while using this dangerously set inner HTML, that it exposes the user to cross-site scripting attack. Guys, the next question he asked me was to implement pagination. He had shared me this API link. This is a JSON placeholder API. And there are 200 random to-dos in this. So he wanted me to display all these 200 to-dos and implement pagination. Okay. Also, along with the pagination, he wanted to have a drop down from where the user can select the number of to-dos displayed at a time. And of course, there should be a previous and next button with the pagination. Okay. So to do that, first of all, I'm going to import use state and use affect hooks from the API so that we can store the different states and call the API with use effect. And I'm also going to import Axios to call the API. Okay, first of all, let's create a new state and let's call it to do's, and a function to set it is set to do's equals to use state, and initially let's say it's an empty array of to do's, and to call the API with hooks I'm going to use effect, and here we can pass the logic, and after that empty array, which means it will behave as a component did mount. It will only run the logic for the first time the component is mounted, and that's what we want. We want to call the API only once when the component is mounted for the first time. Okay, here I'm going to write axios dot get, because this is a get API, and let me copy it and pass the API to it, and write then, which takes a callback and returns the response. And here I can write set to do's response dot data, and let's save it. With that, our API will be called for the first time, and it will save all the to-dos in this to-dos variable. Okay, now let's use this to-dos variable, and I'm going to write to-dos dot map. This takes a callback, and here for time being, let's add a p tag to see whether we are getting the to-dos or not. And here we pass to-do dot title, because in the API you can see every to-do has a title and ID key as well. So I'll use the title here, and that ID key we can pass as a key to every p tag, to-do dot ID. Okay, and let's save it. It's working fine, guys. We can see all the 200 to-dos here. Okay, now the next task is to add the pagination. And to add the pagination, first of all, we need to know the total number of pages which should be displayed here. For that, I'm going to create a new const num of total pages equals to, it will be calculated with this formula math.ceil, which basically rounds up the given number to its closest integer. So for example, if the value is 4.7, then this will return 5. If the value is 3.2, it will return 4, because 4 is the closest integer to it, and it rounds up. Okay. And here I'm going to pass to-dos, this to-dos which we are getting from the API dot length. The length is 200, divide by, and let's say we want to display only 10 to-dos. So here we will pass 10. If you want to display 30, we'll pass 30, 50, then 50. Okay, for now, I'm just writing 10 here. And the better way would be to create a state to this value 10, so that we do not have to hard code it here. So I'm going to write to-dos per days and set to-dos per days equals to use state, and then pass the value 10 here. And instead of hard coding this 10 here, I'll pass to-dos per page now. Now we have the number of total pages. If I simply go ahead and play it here, let's say h1, and then pass this value, number of total pages, and save, and scroll till the down, you'll see we get 20, because there are 200 to-dos, divide by 10 becomes 20. If I make it 50 and save, now you should see 200 divided by 50, 4 pages, correct? So here are the 4 pages. But we do not want to display this 4. We want to display a previous button, then 1, 2, 3, 4, and a next button, right? So for that, we need to create a array by using this number, the number of total pages. To create a array with a number, I'm going to write a new variable pages, because these are the pages only which we are going to display 1, 2, 3, 4. And here I can create a array and pass it the number of total pages. Let me show you what it gives us. Console.log pages. Okay, and let's go to console and save it. You can see, guys, it gives us an array of 4 undefineds. Okay, because we have passed the number of total pages here, which was 4. So it gives us array of 4 undefined. If I make it 10 here, then it should give us an array of 20 undefineds. Okay, and if I make it bigger, you can see each undefined has a index also from 0 to 19. So we will be using these indexes only to create the pagination. And since it starts from 0 and ends at 19, but we want to display the pagination, we want to start the pagination from 1 and we want to end it at 20, correct? For that, we can add a +1 here. And if I save it, I will see it starts from 0 and it ends at 20. Now in our code, we can just ignore the first index, and then it will start from 1 to 20. Okay, and for that I'm going to write keys and a array, and I want to spread it. Save it. Now you will see in the array we have the 0 to 20, but I don't want to consider this 0. For that, uh, I'll simply use the slice method of array and pass 1 to it, which will kind of ignore the first element in the array. And let's save it. Is now we have an array of 20 elements starting from 1 and it ends at 20. That's exactly what we want to display to the user, right? So now let me delete this console. And these pages, I can, instead of this number of total pages, I can use pages dot map then page. And here I'm going to use a span so that all the page number displayed in a single line. If I use a p or div, basically block level element, then they will be displayed in a different line, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. But you want to all of them in a single line, so I'm using span here. And I can pass a page, and every element should have a key. So I'm going to pass key equals to the page. Okay, and instead of this h1, I'm going to use a p tag. Okay, and let's save it and check how it looks. Okay, so now we have the pagination here. So these pages, to distinguish these pages, I'm just going to add a pipe here so that we can clearly see that this is the page. So I'll use a string template here, and this will be dynamic value. And let's save it. So that you can see we have a pipe between, and let's add a space also. Now we can clearly see that, okay, these are the different pages. And I want to have a previous button here and a next button here. For that, I'm going to add a span and which says previous, and let me copy it and paste it here. Let's call it next. Okay, now you can see next, previous, and next. Now to select any of the page, we need to have a state, and let's call it current page. And here I'm going to say set current page equals to use state. The initial value would be 1 because for the first time, the first page would be active. Now we need to find a way whenever user clicks a button, we want to get only those to-dos which should be displayed on that page, right? So if I click page number 10, then a set of to-dos which are associated with page number 10 should be displayed, nothing else, right? So for that, we have our original to-dos, and when a page number is clicked, basically we will display a portion of all these to-dos. So all the number of all to-dos is 200, and whenever a page is clicked, we will pick some set of to-dos from these 200, right? And to pick the set of to-dos from the original to-do, I'm going to create two variables. One is const index of last to-do equals to current page into to-dos per page. So what's going on here is we are just calculating the index of last to do current page. So let's say I'm on page number 4, then the to-dos displayed will be from 30 to 40. So I'll just say current page is 4 and to-dos per page is 10. So this becomes 40, right? And similarly, I can get index of first to do, that I'm going to write index of last to do minus to-dos per page. So in our example, if the page active is 4, then last is index is 40, then 40 minus to-dos per page will become 30 because this is 10 in our case, right? That's how we get the indexes of first and last to-do. And now this portion only, like from 30 to 40 to-dos only, you want to display. And to pick a portion from array, we can use slice method. So I'm going to write here visible to do's. Okay, and here I'm going to write to-dos dot not shifts. It's called slice. And here we can pass a start and end index. So first I'm going to pass the first first index, and the second parameter I'll pass the last to-dos index. Okay, and by default, slice does not include the last to-dos index. So if I pass 1 and 3 here, then it will pick 1 and 2 only. It will ignore the last index. So we're displaying all the 200 to-dos here. Instead of displaying all the 200 to-dos, what I'm going to do is I'll say visible to-dos and save. Okay, with that you can see we have only 10 to-dos visible because we have said to-dos per page is 10. Now if I make it 20 and save, you can see there are 20 to-dos displayed. Okay, so let's change it back to 10. The next thing I want to implement is whenever a user click any page, I want to change these to-dos according to the page which is clicked. What I need to do is, so this is my page. Here I can add a on click event, and inside the on click event I can call this set current page, because whenever a user click any page, technically the user is changing the current page only, correct? So we will call current page and pass the page number to it. So guys, with that, if I click any of the page number, let's say 13, the to do changes, 9 changes, and so on. So this is working. Now I want to implement the previous and next functionality. And before doing that, let's add some styles also here so that we can see which button is, which page is currently active. Okay. For that, I'm going to write a class name here, and inside that, I'll write a backtick, and I'll write current page that is equal to the page I clicked, right? So I want to have active class for that. We'll define the active class in a while, and otherwise I'll just keep it like this. Okay. And I think I have moved, I think it should be inside the backtick, not outside. So let it move it inside and save it. And now let's define the active class in the styles.css. By the way, we are importing styles.css here. And here I can just write the active class. Color is purple, let's say, and just to make it really clear that this is active, I'm going to increase the font size also, and let's save it. Okay, and there I'm going to save it. That if I click 1, it's not working. There is some problem. Let me quickly check it. What's the issue? It should not be closed here. Actually, it should be closed at the end. Okay, let's save it. There is still some issue that unterminated string constant. So okay, I forgot to add the string, close the string here. Now let's save it. Okay, with that you can see the number, page number 4 is active. If I click 10, this is active. If I click 1, this is active. Similarly, we'll implement the previous and next button logic. We just need to check if the active page is 1, then previous should not execute the logic, whatever logic we write. And if the active page is 20, then next should not do anything. Okay, for that, let me add event listener on click. And here I'm going to write previous is handler. And similarly to the next, I'm going to write, don't worry, we are going to write the logic for it in a while. And here I'm going to write next page handler. Okay. Now the first, let's write the previous page handler, and this use effect should be at the top note here. So let me write here. This is the convention, guys. So your hooks should be uh, in the sequence, correct? Now we have all our variables here. Then I'm going to write const previous page handler equals to this. And as I said, first condition would be if current page is equal to 1. I do not want to execute the logic. So let me make it a note operator here. And then this is brackets is not required because this is a one-liner. So I can write set current page, and I'll just decrease one from the current page. So what it is doing, so if it is, let's say the active page is 12 and I click previous, correct, then it will just move it to 11 by using this logic, current page minus 1. Similarly, let me copy it, and here I'll just write next, and instead of 1 this time, I'll pass the number of total pages. The number of total pages is here. Let me copy that and paste it here and save it. And instead of minus, we can make it plus. Now let's try. If I'm on the page number 12, I click previous. It takes me to 11, then 10 and 9. Similarly, if I click next, it takes me 10, 11 and 12, guys. The next thing I want to implement, the only thing pending is we want to have a drop down here. By using that, we can control how many to-dos will be displayed, will be visible to the user. So by default, 10 are visible. So we want to make it dynamic. For that, I'm going to write HTML select element. So I'll write select here and close it. And now we have multiple children inside a written method. So we can use, this is a perfect case to use React fragments. And inside that, I can 50. Now you can see we have the different values here. And now the only thing is whenever the user selects one of them, these visible to do should change. Okay. For that, I'm going to write own change event listener, which takes a callback and gets a event. Okay. And then I can just set do's per page. And by default, it was 10. Now it will be event dot target dot value and save it. There is some issue. Actually, it should not be a round bracket, it should be a curly bracket. So let me change it and save it. Cool. Let's go to first page, and we have 10 to dos. Now, if I change to 30, you can see we have 30, and the page number is also got re-rendered accordingly. So we are displaying 30 to dos per page, and there are 200 to dos, right? So it makes sense that there are only 7. There should be only 7 pages. And now if I make it change it to 50, then there should be only 4 pages. And guys, we have 4 pages. Yeah, if I click next, it works. If I click previous, it works. If I click any specific button, specific page, it works. So guys, this is implemented. If you feel we can improve the logic of pagination, please comment below. Okay, so apart from these JavaScript and React coding questions, there were some theory questions as well. The most of the questions from this video only, so you can check out the video in the description. I'll also put the link here in the video itself, so you can go through all these theory questions, and I think you'll be good for the interview.